Good evening. I'd like to call the November 15th, 2021 Wilson School Board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy? Here. Mrs. Cocker?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mr. Hart? 9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the posting of the colors.
Color guard. Halt. Left face. Sir, permission to post colors. Post colors. Present. Arms. Order. Arms. Left face. Forward. March. Forward. March.
Mrs. Carroll, do we have participation on agenda items?
We do.
All right. Mr. Maravich, I'll turn it over to you.
Rules of participation on school board meetings pursuant to the Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy. There's 2 opportunities to address the board. One is on agenda items, which will happen right after this announcement, and second is on non-agenda items, which will be at the end of the meeting. Individuals attending the meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comments on matters that are or may come before the board. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to individuals. Clapping, calling out, or cheering is not permitted. Participants are requested, audience members are requested to remain in their seats. Please do not disturb the speaker or anyone else in the room while the person is speaking. Conversations are not permitted in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board tables. Individuals shall make their comments from the speaker's lectern. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per individual. I will keep the clock and will give you a notice at 1 minute. Any person making threats or any type of personal, offensive, or impertinent matters, or any person becoming unruly may be removed from the meeting or may be cited by local police. These expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is embedded in board docs and is being amended as we speak. So there's the section regarding videotaping is being changed, at least as a first reading, to allow videotaping with cell phone cameras that won't otherwise disrupt the meeting. If you want to videotape with anything larger, you're going to have to get the still 4 days permission.
Thank you. Mrs. Cocker?
Val Delp, Educational Equity Policy.
Good evening. I'd like to start by reading to you the definitions of discrimination and prejudice. Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people. Prejudice is preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. I'm sure we're all familiar with those. Now, in the last few years, things have become very divided politically, and I would argue that we now largely group each other by political affiliation. So, in a sense, making blanket statements about an entire political party is discrimination. And it is also prejudice, as actual individual experiences are not being looked at or considered. With that being said, I'm disturbed that someone who is a public servant as a member of this board and who says that they strongly support equity would publicly display this kind of discriminatory behavior. It is unprofessional to be yelling at community members at board meetings, calling them anti-science and racist. I'm not sure someone displaying such hatred for people who think differently is the right person for the task of developing an equity policy. I read the revisions to the policy, and you still have not addressed the concerns that we have voiced over the last few weeks. Please vote no on the equity policy as it is. It still needs a lot of work. And if you do vote yes, I highly recommend you consider different leadership if you're going to be appointing an equity council, as this particular board member has clearly demonstrated she has large biases of her own through her public discriminatory remarks. You can't solve hate and discrimination problems with more hate and discrimination. Those problems get resolved with understanding, compassion in our hearts for each other as human beings and neighbors, and a willingness to try and find some common ground. On election day, I had a surprisingly wonderful experience talking with another volunteer at the polls who was not representing myself or the other write-in candidates. We talked at length throughout the day, and I was very grateful that he took some time to ask me questions about why I was running and trying to understand where I was coming from. In the end, although we still did not agree on everything, we did find some common ground. That is what we need more of, putting our beliefs aside and talking to one another. I hope that the 11,000 plus votes to not re-elect 4 of you was enough of a wake-up call to help you understand that a large portion of the community is not happy with the direction this board is taking things. Please, as public figures and representatives of this community, start listening again, start working with us again. That is how we all heal, and that is how we all come together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lisa Marie Stoneha, Equity Security.
Good evening. Thank you for the current revisions on the equity policy, eliminating many of the financial costs to the community. I ask that you continue to review and look at ways to reduce costs as we look at as well as what we are looking to try to solve here. It seems like we're trying to revise a policy that truly doesn't need our attention right now. What does need our attention is the growing security issue at our schools. We have a growing safety and security problem for our teachers, staff, students, and community. It's becoming common for one of our schools to go into lockdown each week. And this is just the lockdowns that we're made aware of. This does not include the lock-ins where we're not made aware of when they happen. We're hearing stories of kids screaming at top of their lungs in the hallway, kids throwing desks, our kids having to stay in their classrooms because there's an incident going on and they have to stay there for their safety, fights breaking out, kids vandalizing property on their walks home. We hear examples of complete and utter disrespect to our teachers, and recently, an active shooter threat. Proof of this growing issue is the fact that we're requesting 5 additional guidance counselors to handle this issue. And yes, this is a start, but we need to do more to protect our kids, teachers, staff, and community. And this board needs to make safety and security a higher priority right now. Please consider conducting a full security assessment. Identify where our gaps are and what do we need to do to make our schools safer, to help out our teachers, staff, administration, and our kids. Hold a town hall and educate our families of what you're doing to protect everyone and what you're going to change or continue to do. Empower the community on what we can do, because when we get a call that says we can't go to school and get our kid, we feel helpless. And many don't know why they can't just go there and grab their kid. I've experienced an active shooter firsthand, and I can speak to the benefits of everyone being overinformed and aware of what to do. When you're in that situation, it is so scary. And you're not always thinking clearly, but having others who are trained and know what to do helps save lives. And to be clear, I'm not saying that we're not trained. I'm saying our school, our administrators and teachers need more help. We have a growing need for security and safety in our schools. Please prioritize and address this.
1 minute.
Lastly, I want to address a leadership issue on this board. To the board member who continues to insult the community by telling us we are not the real community, that we don't have the courage to run for school board, accusing us of not doing research before we speak, or that we do not believe in science, and most recently, that we are racist because we did not vote for you. You owe your community an apology. I'm not sure why, as a leader within this community, you continue to act in a way that embarrasses our school, but we are asking you to please stop. Regardless of the outcome of this election, as it is not finalized yet, it is very telling that over 11,000 votes took the time to stop and do a write-in, setting many voting records. These voters took the time to express their discontent with this board and asked to be heard. It's time to listen and bridge the gap in our amazing community, not continue to alienate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Janakovo, Equity Policy.
So to quote the wise Beyonce, if you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. Well, I like seeing our Wilson community succeed, and I like seeing our students excel. What I don't like is how this board operates, so I'm putting a ring on it. Now that the election's over, I still plan to be here, meeting after meeting, all the way through for the next few years. And by the way, your new update to community participation doesn't scare me off or push me off the ball either. Remember, if this board would seek to violate civil rights, it needs to present the burden of proof, and that burden of proof isn't found on Facebook. Please pass this equity policy. Might be weird hearing that from me. Because in doing so, this board will be forced to address the inequities it governs over. And since the election is over, maybe now you'll pay attention. Maybe now you'll put down the cell phones and stop banging away on the laptops and finally listen. So I'll repeat myself tonight, as I have in the past, and I will going forward. Passing the equity policy means you'll have to own your own hypocrisy. So please pass it. Pass it so that your own policy and community can hold you to account. You're going to approve the policy tonight while having your own equity task force withhold teacher-submitted responses about inequity in your own district. You'll spend upwards of $45 million on expansion projects while not adding one usable classroom, while some board members campaigned that we're overcrowded. This board plays heavy with face masks on students while living their personal lives differently. This school district even goes so far as to threaten students with a parent and principal meeting if they have to continue to give a child a mask. This is after taking $7 million plus in ESSER funds. You cancel the 2020 class graduation and 1 week later permit a protest on the very same grounds. Your hypocrisy just doesn't seem to end. Someone in leadership, sadly, actively continues to look for racism and is surprised that it doesn't exist. Some will opine and bloviate about equity, but still, in your own words, break children's hearts who can't afford an enrichment trip in their senior year. You talk about equity an awful lot, but in light of your BCTC students losing 60% of their career center time, March of 2019 through June of 2021, not a single word then and not till now was ever said in this room to prevent that from happening again. So if this policy must exist to properly govern, so be it. Just know this policy is a house built upon sand, and some of your teachers' own words say as much. As a board, you were asked the 5 to 10 areas of focus we can address. That question was ignored. As confirmed in this room at the last meeting, the administration, along with all other schools in the county, pledged to circumvent their boards by directing policy and signing an equity pledge without any direction from this board specifically. This is in direct contradiction to how a board and an administration should work together. You all flip the coin on your local authority all the time, so we'll see once again your own display of hypocrisy in January when the mask mandate ends and you choose at that time to do what you want to do in regards to masks. You constantly choose the side of the coin that suits your agenda. So, pass the policy, because tomorrow you'll have to deal with the Southern students who deal with your own inequity you govern over against the students at West.
Thank you.
Callie McGuire, Crossing Guard for Shiloh Hills.
Good evening. My name is Callie McGuire. I'm a parent of a third grade student at Shiloh Hills Elementary School. For the past 2 years, I've been emailing school, transportation, and the Spring Township Police Department pleading for a crossing guard to be posted at the corner of Sage Drive and Colt Street. While I've had responses from all parties, nothing has changed to make this a safe crossing for our children. I live 2 doors away from this intersection. On a daily basis, I witness the amount of cars that drive over the speed limit on this street. During school dismissal hours, either myself or another neighborhood parent make sure to be available at this crossing site to assist the children. 3 weeks ago, I stood in the middle of the street within the crosswalk. I was about to give the students permission to cross when a car got impatient and drove right past me. Had one of these students taken one step into the street at this time, they would have been struck. Not to mention me being in the middle of the road at the time. Students who take the bus have a stop sign. If a car goes past them at this time, there's a penalty. Why are our walkers not afforded the same level of safety and security to get to and from school? A few weeks prior to this incident, a young girl was not paying attention and crossed the street without looking to talk to her friends. This child was not within the crosswalk, and this was not a safe decision on her part, but she was mere inches from being struck due to the speed at which the car was driving. There have been an absurd amount of times when the number of cars and sometimes even buses go past without stopping for the students who are waiting in this crosswalk. Unfortunately, you can hear me screaming at them all the time. There has to be a parent there at all times to make sure these kids are safe, which should not be the case. We should be at ease that our children can safely cross the road with the assistance of a crossing guard. Following this incident,
1 minute.
as the Shiloh Hills PTO co-president, I emailed all the parents on my email chain, pleading for them to slow down. This past Friday, as a group of 7 students were waiting to cross the street, with the parent on another side, not 1, but 3 cars drove past without even acknowledging the presence of a crosswalk, the parent, or the children waiting. I believe my whole neighborhood could hear me yell that day. Many of the families that are asking for help are directly involved with the events serving the district and the community through means of the PTO. People who pour time, money, and energy to bring this togetherness to the district in Shiloh Hills, it feels like a direct slap in the face to be told that our time and efforts are good enough to serve the community, but not enough to protect our children. Within the next 2 years, the amount of children in this neighborhood will increase significantly. However, if only 1 child needs assistance safely crossing the street, the safety of that 1 child's life should be enough to hire a crossing guard. Please don't let the travesty of an incident at the expense of one of our children be what finally causes something to be done. A travesty that would permanently leave a mark on this community. As a school district that prides itself, and rightfully so, on the safety they've provided students throughout a global pandemic, I would hope that the decision to safety extends to all parameters of protection for the Wilson School District children. Please help me and my fellow neighbors who have joined me here tonight in preventing such an incident from occurring. Please vote yes for stationing a crossing guard for our little bulldogs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lori Hu, Comprehensive Plan.
Good evening, board members. I'm here to talk about the comprehensive plan with its implementation dates of 2021 to 24 and how it has been developed without including specific provisions regarding the effects of COVID-19. Slide 7 of the plan lists the benchmarks that will be used to analyze growth. These include the CDTs, PSSAs, and local assessments. I want to know if the 2021 PSSA data will be used. Last year at West Middle School, students were encouraged to opt out of the PSSA. And furthermore, when I inquired, I was told that last year's PSSAs would come with a disclaimer that the results weren't valid. A large number of students opted out, so I'd like to know how the data will be interpretive if only half the students took the PSSA. And what will Wilson do if parents continue to opt their students out of standardized tests in the future? Looking at slide 10, Wilson expresses that they want to create pathways for all students to access higher level courses. High school scheduling is pretty easy. Students are able to select whatever courses they desire. I checked with my son, and he acknowledged that one does need a teacher signature to take upper level classes. So it seems to me whatever roadblocks may exist are there because the district has put them on the kids. In regard to the AP classes, at least with my children, it's their experience that there aren't enough sections offered. For example, neither of my children were able to fit AP English into their schedule senior year, and both had to drop down. And this was 2 years in a row. If you polled the students who take AP classes, it would be very apparent that most receive phone calls a few weeks after school ends, informing them that all their selected courses won't fit into their schedule. So if you really want to increase access, more sections of each course need to be offered. And my children are only what I term middle-of-the-road AP students.
1 minute.
My oldest didn't even take AP till his junior year, but by the end, he ended up with 6 credits. And I want to make sure that in your desire to increase access, you don't water down the curriculum or teaching methods, because the prize of AP is college credit. Because of AP, my freshman has an easy schedule, and we are saving thousands of dollars. If Wilson doesn't keep rigor in the AP classes, my youngest son won't have access to the same educational opportunities that his brother had. And finally, I'd like to see something in the plan regarding access to the advanced 8th grade integrated science that's supposed to be offered next year. The plan calls for pathways, but gives no details. When I spoke with middle school teachers and administrators regarding criteria for 8th grade integrated science versus 8th grade general science, I was told that it had not yet been developed, and scheduling's in only a few months. It will be unfair to exclude students from taking advanced science in 8th grade because the district hasn't been transparent in their selection criteria. I urge the board to look carefully at the comprehensive plan. It needs to take COVID into account, and it needs to have more details and specifics added. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chastity Santiago, Equity 832.
Okay, so I'm here to just speak out. I am one of the Hispanic mothers in our community that was denied the opportunity to speak about the equity policy that was supposed to impact my kid. So equal opportunity does not mean equal outcome, and rebranding a CRT under the guise of education equality does not change the premise it's built on. Education equity or equality of outcomes is a terrifying idea. It eliminates personal responsibility and promotes shames through unequal treatment and of all of our children. I believe that every individual is different. Each person has a different value, different passions, and different talents. This means it's foolish to pursue equality of outcomes since we're not equipped to be equal. You know, everybody is good at their own thing. This is because we have unique talents that differ from person to person. If you really care about all children, then focus on the needs and that need to be shifted to providing equal opportunity and celebrating exceptionalism. I suggest, everybody's a fan of required reading. Why don't you all add Kurt Vonnegut's Harrison Bergeron to your reading list and then let the kids read it and see if they like this terrible dystopian idea. It's a truly frightening story, but that is the road we're going down. I don't feel that any of our children look at each other and see color, see money. They see their friends. I don't understand where this is coming from. And the sad part is that you really don't care, because I am one of those people, my son's one of those people, and you wouldn't even let me speak because I don't play into your narrative. So, while you sit here and pat yourselves on the back for a policy that you think is great, just know that you're stripping myself and my son and many of these other families of their dignity and their right of personal responsibility. So next time you guys have want to pat yourself on the back, remember me, because you're going to see me at every meeting.
Thank you.
And this one is about student services, but I'm not sure if it's related to the agenda, student services. Gwen Hill, is it related to the agenda? Okay. Gwen Hill, student services.
I'll explain that.
myself on never being late, and I was late tonight, and I will explain why. So I have 4 kids, and 3 in Wilson, one soon-to-be bulldog who's 3, who's in the stage of hiding mommy's keys. So that's one of the reasons I was late. But when I looked at my keychain, which has some Wilson stuff on it, my kids' sweatshirts and other items around my house, I see my family's pride in Wilson. It's no secret who I supported in the last election, and while I was going door to door for the write-in candidates, I saw so much pride throughout the Wilson community, from Wilson flags to little stone bulldogs to even door coverings with athletes' names on it and, hey, have a good race or have a good match. Really cool to see. However, as you heard tonight from others, our community is still fractured. Some fractures can heal on their own, but unfortunately not this one. You as board members have a chance to do something about that. You're starting to hear us. I definitely saw some positive changes with the equity policy, as suggested by parents in this room, not by you guys. And I personally would still throw it out the window, as we already have plans in place for all students to succeed at Wilson. But we're getting there. But anyway, we have bigger problems at Wilson, school safety. Sometimes we get the truth, and sometimes we get smoke and mirrors. We parents aren't asking for anyone to break anonymity, but it would be nice to have a more accurate and pertinent information. My kids have come home scared and confused a few times recently, and to me, that is unacceptable. The reason I bring that up is, as parents, we are lunch aides. We are on the PTO. We are watchdog dads. Obviously, I'm not a mom. We volunteer for field trips and other programs with the school. And we don't go to into the school with blinders on. We see a lot of things. And mainly I'm speaking about the little kids because my kids are little. But one of the things I've noticed is how masks affect our children's behavior. It's hard to hear and respond to your teachers, and being heard is so important for little kids. And so it's facial expression, and covering the face, it covers the expression. And I really feel that a lot of the incidents we've had lately could be avoided if we could get rid of these masks. The other side of masks, too, is that the kids, outside the classroom, or sometimes even in the classroom, in the lunchroom, the playground, they're touching each other, they're sharing food, they're hugging. What is the point of these masks? I just don't get it. Friday night, we went to a school event. It was off school grounds, but it was indoors. 90% of the students, staff, and parents were maskless. Again, what is the point? And now you want our kids to be guinea pigs with your testing and your contact tracing. I don't get it. It's ludicrous. One of you has accused us parents of not believing in science. I believe in science, I believe in our legal system, and I also believe to follow the money, because that's what this is all about, money. The money the district receives for making masks mandatory, as well as the next steps with the testing. No one gets a cold, the flu, or pneumonia anymore. It's all COVID. The numbers are skewed, and the situation is a disgrace. Your health and safety plan, it really needs a rewrite. Oh, thank you very much. And I also agree with the crossing guard situation at Shiloh. My kids take the bus because of that dangerous intersection. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Hart.
Okay, Dr. Fadley, I'll turn it over to you to introduce.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. This evening, I will give a brief update on Policy 832, the equity policy. As communicated at our last board meeting, there were some requests for additions to the policy. Those additions have been added to the policy. The following items were requested by board members and members of the community. Conversations about not lowering the standards for career, college, and life readiness. That was added to the policy. Requests that we clarify the policy and its expense to the district. So in addition, on the policy this evening, you will see that there will be the creation of an equity council that will act as a subgroup of the Student Services Committee. That equity council will be responsible for creating an annual equity goals and reporting progress to the board and the community on a semi-annual basis. The Equity Council will also assist in the development of metrics and to track progress toward established equity goals. The Equity Council will conduct a district-wide educational equity audit to collect qualitative and quantitative data on progress toward these goals and the perspectives of stakeholders. In addition, there was some misunderstanding regarding the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator. And you will see that that appointment is for a current administrator that is already employed in the district to assume that responsibility. And finally, there was conversation regarding the district's high standards of employment, and that was also added to the policy. A board member requested that the definitions that are inclusive on the last page of the policy be bolded in the actual policy itself. That has occurred. It has been a pleasure to work with the community through a forum to listen to the comments of the community, as well as having a forum and a work session with identified stakeholders that were selected by the board to help refine the process of this policy, as well as adding these additions to make the policy as good as it can be moving forward. I want to commend the community for their conversation, their professionalism, and the respect afforded as we navigated this topic, which had some differences of opinion, but I think as testimony has indicated this evening, that individuals that may have once been against the policy are now supporting the policy. And I think that's a step in the right direction. I would continue to add that policy is an ongoing process, and as information changes and/or the direction or the community finds other priorities, that it's important that we continue to listen to our stakeholders in modifying the policy in future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beardley. The board did meet in executive session before the meeting this evening. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on November 1st, 2021 as attached.
So moved, Case.
Mr. Case first, do you have a second?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Treasurer's report, Mr. Martin.
Oops, okay. Just give me a second, I got too many papers in front of me here. Okay, sorry. All right. Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight the following reports: the Treasury report, the investment report, the general capital funds report, and the financial reports as presented.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight out of the general fund $2,299,850.63, and the capital reserve $25,717.13. Out of the 2019 A construction fund $303,290.16, and out of the 2021 C construction fund $195,210.75.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Financial reports, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for the month of October the following reports: the cafeteria, child care activity reports from Southern Middle School, Wilson West, and the senior high.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Case.
Mr. Case, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report. Dr.
Thank you,
Bateman.
Mr. Hart. This evening, the superintendent's report is inclusive of personnel and program recommendations. I submit these for approval as listed.
Looking for a motion to approve superintendent items 6.1 through 6.7 as presented.
McCray?
Mrs. McCray first. Do we have a second?
Schneider?
Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Consent items. Mrs. Cocker.
Request to accept with gratitude the following donations. From Burlington Stores and Adopt a Classroom, an online marketplace credit in the amount of $5,000 to Cornwall Terrace Elementary School to be used for classroom supplies. From Patient First, a check in the amount of $1,000 to Spring Ridge Elementary School to be used for books. From Tracy Markle, 25 books to Mr. Schultz's 4th grade classroom library at Whitfield Elementary School. From Shiloh Hills PTO, 4 picnic tables and 2 benches to be used at Shiloh Hills Elementary School.
Looking for a motion to accept with gratitude the donations as presented.
So moved, Case?
Mr. Case first. Do we have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Human Resources, 8.1, request approval for 1 full-time cook floater to assume cafeteria management positions, ensuring that students have nutritious meals in all buildings. 8.2, request approval of the elementary and secondary teacher on assignment of job descriptions as presented. 8.3, I'm sorry. Request approval of 7 long-term substitutes, 5 for elementary and 2 for secondary, to fill the teachers on assignment vacancies to be paid through the ESSER funds for the 2021-22 school year. 8.4, 8.5, request to approve the teacher on assignment stipends of $2,500 for the 2021-2022 school year. Looking for motion to approve human resources agenda items 8.1 through 8.5 as presented.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper first. Do we have a second?
Kennedy?
Dr. Kennedy, any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Martin?
in reading this, I think it's, I'm sorry. I always do that. Especially 8.4 and 8.3. 8.4 talks about these 5 full-time counselors. We seem to be spending a lot of money, and we're getting very little out of it. And the reason why I'm saying this is we hired a bunch of social workers who are supposed to be helping adjust in these classrooms and these kids' special situations. Obviously, that's not working. So we hired all those social workers over the last couple of years. Now we're going to hire 5, and this ties into the equity policy, believe it or not. If you're really paying attention, this transverses into the equity policy. And this is just another step that we're becoming a social organization and not an educational organization. So if you're fine with that, that's fine too, because, you know, people elect the people to vote. But this is really starting to cost, this is going to cost $500,000 a year. Okay, and it says the first year is ESSER funds, but that goes away. So somebody's had to foot that bill along with the social administrations. So somebody's footing these bills. So the question really is, when are we going to stop trying to be the parents, and when are we going to try to enforce some rules? I mean, if kids are misbehaving and disrupting the room, there's reasons for that. Let's fix that. Let's not try to put a Band-Aid on a situation. Let's, you know, it's like everything else. You try to fix something after it happens. Maybe, you know, find a cure first. So I'm not happy with this. It's a very expensive proposition. It's going to go on forever. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse because we choose not to do discipline in school. We choose not to hold parents accountable. So that's it. Thank you.
We have a first and a second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Hart, I think it would be appropriate at this time just to have some additional comment from Dr. Stout on these recommendations. I think she had provided some significant reasoning and rationale for the increased numbers of concerns that are taking place within our elementary, middle school buildings, that, hopefully, to Mr. Martin's point, that it is given the current state of where we are right now, as opposed to a long-term requirement, to Mike's point. So I know Dr. Stout had shared some of that information with me, and I think that would be helpful for the public as well.
Okay, certainly. There was a lot of information shared, but your specific question was, what types of tasks are our counselors engaging in currently? So I'll start with the counseling situation. Currently, we're finding that we were aware of the fact that students would return to school after experiencing trauma, after experiencing lapses in their educational continuity, and that we knew that we would have to anticipate an adjustment both behaviorally and emotionally and socially. We did not really understand the magnitude of that impact. And so what we're finding is our counselors are currently really responsive on a day-to-day basis, so they are unable to do the work that they might have done in a preventative type of model. And I gave this particular illustration that maybe make it helpful for everyone to hear once more, is that in an ideal world, we would have an upside down pyramid. So if you think about prevention being the largest part of the pyramid, and then interventions that we do would be the next part, and the most narrow, tiniest need would be that of remediation. And what we're finding is the exact opposite is true. Our triangle is very little opportunity for prevention, especially at what we call Tier 1, which means for every student to experience, and the intervention goes out from there. But what we're dealing with right now, due to lack of stamina, behavioral concerns, social and emotional concerns, and just an inability to adjust to the return to school currently in our environment, that remediation piece is rather large. So what we're talking about is using the funds that we've received to be able to intervene in the areas of mental health and social and emotional needs of students that we are finding. And someone mentioned about safety and security, and so that sort of speaks to the other pieces with the teacher on assignment as well. We are finding that our principals are also in a response mode and are addressing behaviors on an everyday basis. And so a lot of their administrative duties are really consumed with doing things that they may not have done in the past. So we have a large population of students that have IEPs and needs. So our principals are attending those meetings, making sure that they're able to be accessible to those parents and families that need them. They're dealing with indirect services, along with our counselors, making sure that families are getting the supports that they need, not just the students. And additionally, they're monitoring lunch periods for excessive periods of time because our buildings are crowded at the elementary level, and they're needing to monitor those behaviors because we have students with much less coping skills and ability to navigate the issues that they had perhaps in place in the past. So all of these things add up to the fact that we're looking to be able to provide relief and support in all of our buildings for all of our students, to teach them the skills that they need so that they can become more resilient and navigate what's been going on. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions if I didn't answer already.
Hey, Dr. Stout.
Yes.
To Mike's point, could you share the delineation of responsibilities between social workers and counselors?
Sure. So currently, elementary school has one social worker. So we hired that social worker not that long ago. I can't tell you exactly when. The beginning of this year, she started. Her job is to really connect our families to community services and supports, whereas our school counselors are doing indirect and direct services provided within the school building. So direct service is when you're working directly with a student. So it's de-escalation techniques, it's providing counseling opportunities, meeting with students one-on-one to work through whatever it is that they're working through. Some of those indirect services may be connecting students to other areas of need that they have, or checking in on what's happening with behaviors in their classrooms and things like that that involve other adults as well. So does that make sense? The social worker is more of a community connection, whereas our counselors do some of that. And I think Mrs. Grant is here and could speak more to that if we needed to. She is a counselor at Spring Ridge. But as of now, we have one social worker for 5 elementary school buildings, and we have one counselor in each of our elementary school buildings, keeping in mind that the recommendation from the School Counselor Association, that's the national association, says we should have one counselor for every 250 students. Right now, we have one counselor for anywhere from 500 and almost 40 students to 622 students. So that's the reason that we're asking for a second full-time counselor, so that we can be at least closer to ratio as suggested. Yes.
Do you anticipate difficulty finding 5 school counselors?
We certainly hope not, but right now, obviously this is a time where we want to choose high-quality individuals that have gone through a high-quality counseling program, and finding those individuals is challenging. So we think it's important that we get these supports for our students, so we are ready and willing to look for those candidates.
So Dr. Stout, just to summarize, my understanding of this recommendation is the difference between being challenged to meet students' needs and finding an inability at this point to meet students' needs.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, we'd love to be doing some of those co-teaching opportunities where we're doing counseling lessons in the classroom and so on and so forth. Our counselors currently are unable to get to the tasks that they used to be able to do in collaboration with staff, because they're addressing immediate responsive needs in the buildings.
Thank you, Dr. Stout.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Martin?
And I certainly don't have an issue on a temporary basis because of COVID, but once again, we're putting a policy in place for a situation that's going to go away. Well, depends who you talk to. I'm not going to get into that conversation, but it's once again, it's kind of misleading because it can be for ESSER funds. Well, yeah, that's true for this year. But what happens after that? We have to pick up, the taxpayers have to pick up the tab. And that's $500,000 is a big number each year. And it's going to go on forever. And we want to hire some more down the road, which is another bigger bill. We want to build a new elementary school for lower class sizes, which is another $6 million. So it seems like, I'm a little concerned because normally in the past, the financial committee would be involved in this decision process. We weren't consulted. The financial committee wasn't consulted. We weren't even talked to. It's just, we're going to do this. There's no projections out how long the costs are going to be, the repercussions. There was nothing discussed with the, once again, it was made by an HR committee who, unfortunately, is pro-education. Brad, you're on the committee, Steph's on the committee, and I get that. But we used to have processes in place where we looked at expenditures before we bring them to the board for vote. We totally bypassed the committee, and I don't think that's appropriate. So that's it. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion?
President Hart, I would like to make a point that we can't sit here and claim that we care about the mental health of our students and that we care about teen suicide, especially during the situation that we've been living in the last 2 years, and then not commit to providing those services to those students with whom we care about the mental health and suicide. So it doesn't go both ways. And I'm also not just pro-education, I'm pro-mental health. And those two things need to coincide, because you can't have a student sitting in class who's having a mental health crisis paying attention to the history teacher. So I fully support this and would hope that our community understands why we need these services at the moment.
I have to have a final comment. We don't care, we didn't care a whole lot when 2 students killed themselves back to back because we forced them out of school, but that's okay. We don't care about a situation where we have a child at some special education that bites teachers, spits on teachers, kicks people, scratching claws, causing all sorts of harm to that teacher, and the administration knows about this and cares not to address it. There's danger there, there's disease there, so I'm not buying into this. The bottom is we bypassed the committee to achieve a goal. That's the situation. We're supposed to work together, but we choose not to work together because we push things through. I'm not saying this committee would have been for or against it, but just to bypass the committee and say we're going to do this is wrong.
Any other comments or discussion? We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin? Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Student Services, Mrs. Cocker.
9.1, request approval for a service agreement with PubSeg, Public Safety and Economic Growth, to provide contact tracing, notification, and reporting of positive cases at a cost of $5,500 in startup and training fees, and then invoiced at a rate of $40 to $47 per hour on a schedule determined on a week-to-week basis during the course of the agreement and funded through ARP ESSER grant monies. This service agreement is pending solicitor review and approval. 9.2, request approval of a service agreement with WeTalk to perform speech and language therapy services for Wilson students K through 5 at a cost of $900 per school day or $450 per half day for the 2021-2022 school year, pending solicitor review and approval.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve Student Services agenda items 9.1 and 9.2 as presented.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper first. Do we have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker, any discussion?
Mr. Hart?
Yes, Mr. Negrini.
I have 2 points. One is just in the wording of the current document that indicates that daily reporting would be provided to LA County. I'm assuming that's a typographical error that can be addressed. This is probably a cut and paste from a prior service agreement that this group had provided to other school districts, presumably in California. But secondly, in terms of question of, contract tracing as we've been doing it currently, and why at this point that we feel the need that we cannot continue to do this in-house. This is a 3-week training period, so we're talking about almost the end of the school year before this particular group gets involved in contact tracing. So I'm just curious as to the mindset of coming up with this particular service agreement with this company.
Dr. Huffer, can you come to the microphone and outline the reason for the public safety and economic growth contract?
Sure. This service agreement is designed to alleviate the responsibility of contact tracing from our school nurses. We currently have double-staffed our nurses in order to accommodate for the amount of time and energy that they're responsible for making phone calls, following up with families, identifying positive cases and then potential close contacts, and following through on all those phone calls throughout the week. So we have additional nurse staffing in each of our buildings to provide some additional coverage so that those activities can be done by our nurses. Essentially, we'd be able to eliminate that extra staffing and have that responsibility taken over by this third-party provider, then allowing our nurses to get back to nursing during the school day, and that's kind of our goal here. The 3-week period is a time spent with our nurses learning our system. They would then kind of customize their approach based on what our requirements are locally, and then they would provide a single point of contact for the district and for families to use to report cases, collect the data, do all the interviews, provide all the notification, all of those steps that our administrative team and our nurses have been covering for the past 2 years. The contract is designed, or the service agreement is designed to be week to week and flexible so that as cases are dropping, we can pull back on services, we can reduce the number of hours that our contact tracers are in place, or if cases are increasing, we can increase the staff on a week to week basis. So that's the reason for kind of the short term length of the contract. To your point, there are a few errors in the current draft of this. It is out for solicitor review right now. We're waiting for that to come back with the final version. But yeah, we did notice a few discrepancies in some of the language in the initial paragraphs, which we are working on correcting.
And have our current nursing staff been unable to fulfill their daily duties outside of the contact tracing reporting requirements? Obviously, as Dr. Stout had alluded to in terms of our guidance counselors and the services that they typically provide and have been unable to do at this time. What are we talking about in terms of our nursing
Yeah,
staff?
we've at a minimum had to provide an additional staff member, additional nursing staff member in one of our subs or one of our part-timers to go in and alleviate or to relieve the full-time nurse from the building so that they can take care of other duties in the nurse's office and still be able to fit in the contact tracing. That's taken up an inordinate amount of time from our building nurses. But the additional staffing we'd be able to reduce by going to this contract.
Thank you, Dr. Hoffert. First and a second, any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
That's 8 yes, 1 no.
Under Finance, 10.1, request permission to submit 2 delinquent accounts for Berks County Tax Claim Bureau. 10.2, request approval of the budget transfers dated October 12, 2021 through November 9, 2021. 10.3, request permission to create a Letters of Love Wilson High School chapter and establish a student activity account in the High School Student Activities Fund. Looking to approve the Finance agenda items 10.1 through 10.3 as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Martin first, do you have a second?
McCray?
Mr. McCray, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Curriculum and Staff Development, Mrs. Cocker.
11.1, request permission to approve an agreement with KPETS for therapy animals for high school flex day, pending solicitor review and approval. 11.2, request approval of the Wilson School District Comprehensive Plan 2021 to 2024 as attached. 11.3, a request to approve the contract between the Berks County Intermediate Unit and Wilson School District to provide required Titled 1, 2, and 4 services to our non-public schools at a cost of up to $17,618.44. Amounts may vary based on final federal program allocations for the 2021-22 school year, pending solicitor review and approval.
Looking for a motion to approve Curriculum and Staff Development agenda items 11.1 through 11.3 as presented.
Schneider, so
Mr.
moved.
Schneider first, do you have a second?
Kennedy?
Dr. Kennedy, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Hart? 8 yes, 1 no.
Under Transportation, 12.1, request permission to purchase a new snowplow at a cost of $7,623 from EM Incorporated. 12.2, request permission to hire and train a new crossing guard to be placed at Sage and Colt in the Shiloh Hills Elementary School community at an approximate cost of $4,900 per year. Total cost is $9,800 a year, shared 50% with Spring Township. 12.3, request permission to auction obsolete shop equipment from the Transportation Department. 12.4, request approval of bus routes and stops for school years 2021-22, subject to administrative changes throughout the school year. Looking for a motion to approve transportation agenda items 12.1 through 12.4 as presented.
McCray?
Mr. McCray first, do you have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, any discussion?
Yeah, if I could, President Hart. As someone who also lives in the Shiloh Hills neighborhood, I'd like to thank the people who mentioned that this evening. I walk my kids when I can. My schedule doesn't really allow for it, but I do parent pickup, and there's some people that drive like maniacs. My turn into my driveway is kind of a tight turn, and I daily expect to get rear-ended. So I would encourage everybody to vote for this.
Any other discussion?
Just to comment on that, and 100% agree with you. But a little bit to Mr. Martin's point with regard to where the school comes in, why aren't we calling the police department to do a traffic study? Or if people are speeding in your neighborhood constantly, we should be calling the police and having them sort of hand out some speeding tickets every now and then in general. I mean, I agree with the crosswalk, but we're putting a Band-Aid on a problem.
Mr. Williams, do you want to come to the microphone and give an update on all of the work that's gone into this particular situation up at Sage and Colt over the last several months?
Sure. Actually, there was a traffic study done by Spring Township Police. The speed through that area fell in the lower 25th percentile on an average. They set out for multiple hours over multiple days, believe it or not. It was 25.8 miles an hour on average. Now, of course, you have the outliers going way faster and way slower, but the average traffic pattern was that. They also evaluated putting stop signs on Sage on each side of Colt. And unfortunately, per DOT regulations, there's not enough traffic collisions up there to warrant a stop sign. So there were some traffic studies done, including speed, to evaluate that.
So to your point, Mr. Case, I will notify Officer Johnson, our school resource officer, regarding the traffic. I'll use the word lack of safety from some of our community drivers and see if we can position or have him coordinate some traffic stops or tickets or whatever the case might be to ensure the safety of our students, because it is an excellent point. One of the reasons, after discussing with Mr. Williams and the township, that we moved so quickly to establish this crosswalk.
Thank you. Just a question about the equipment for auction. What is the mechanism for the auction?
The program mechanism is called Municipid. I believe it's an electronic bidding process where people go on and bid, and we're able to recapture some dollars for equipment that is no longer able to be used by the district.
And I would just ask if we can put some on our webpage that the community, at least for Wilson, can bid on that equipment. Just, it's.
Yes, we'll take care of that.
Thank you.
We have a first and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under policies, 13.1, final reading and adoption of the following new and/or reviews policies as attached. Mrs. Cocker, could you read off the policies, please?
Sure. 006, meetings. 218.2, weapons or the replicas. 218.3, terroristic threats or acts. 236.1, threat assessment. 247, hazing. 249, bullying or cyberbullying. 251, homeless students. 805, emergency preparedness and response. 805.2, school security personnel. 832, educational equity.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to approve the adoption of the following new and/or revised policies as attached.
Cocker.
Mrs. Cocker first. Do we have a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, any discussion?
Mr. Hart, can we pull a separate vote for 832?
Yes, we
As
can.
opposed to the other proposed policies, please, for a
Mrs.
separate
Carroll,
vote.
we'll vote on the first policies, and we'll hold policy 832 separately.
Okay.
Any other discussions on these policies? Roll call, please.
Which one are we voting on?
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Policy 832, equity. Looking for motion.
Kennedy?
Dr. Kennedy first. Do we have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, any discussion?
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Obviously, this has been a topic of significant discussion, debate, public comment for a number of months. And as was indicated earlier, the number of write-in votes in the Wilson School District were substantial, record-breaking, I'm sure, by all accounts for a recent municipal election. And again, the recurring theme is some potential revisions to this policy, and that there's been some discussions about further revisions to the policy. I know Dr. Faley mentioned about that this certainly can be a working document that we can certainly look to modify in the future as information is brought forth to the committee, as information is brought forth to the administration, as information is brought forth to the board. One of the questions that was raised at the last meeting, I believe, by Mr. Case was the issue of cost analysis. And again, reading the policy as it's currently worded, that the education equity, to facilitate educational equity, the district shall be committed. It is not a may or should or any other wording. It is specifically shall be committed to identifying and addressing barriers that create achievement and/or opportunity gaps. And again, I think there's certainly areas upon which that the district can certainly improve upon, and that can be done without significant cost, as Mr. Case had looked into. However, barriers as defined in our policy include class size. And certainly when evaluating these opportunity and achievement gaps, class size certainly plays a factor in those opportunities and or achievement for students. And there is a cost to making adjustments to class sizes. And again, I'm certainly no expert on the research on this. Dr. Kennedy, I certainly could recite forward and backwards the research on that. I think most educators are familiar with the STAR project and the Center for Public Education, but it talks about the recommended classroom sizes, especially within the elementary setting, for being ideal for academic achievement, especially when it comes to the economically disadvantaged and minority population of classroom sizes between 13 and 17 students. Certainly, the cost to such a classroom size would be significant should that type of recommendation be brought forth as part of this policy. And the question that I have is the mechanism that this policy puts forth on administration and future boards is how the district shall address that particular area if ultimately, based upon this equity audit, it would suggest that we need to do that in order to break down these barriers in economic and academic achievement for some of those subgroups within our student population. And does that put the district in a particular box when it comes to spending money and the requirements of spending money? And so that I believe is somewhat challenging from my standpoint in terms of the wording of the policy as it currently stands, and whether or not by approving it as it currently is written, that we are obligated based upon some of these findings as it pertains to classroom size or other barriers that are listed in the definition portion of the policy that will require action regardless of costs. My second question pertains to the second point in to facilitate educational equity. The district shall be committed to ensuring that a student's educational achievement is neither predicted nor predetermined by explicit or implicit biases. And again, the definitions are listed in the policy as far as both explicit and implicit bias. The question that I have is who will be the arbiter of what is or is not, or what does or does not constitute implicit bias, which is significantly harder to identify and ultimately make changes to. And then finally, we as a board do have the ability to approve curriculum. We've done that several times through the years, and we did so recently in terms of making some changes to the math curriculum, which we heard a fair amount of parents speak to. Mrs. Hu, I believe, was here earlier with that. However, what I don't believe that the board really has much input on or have any say towards is the professional development and learning that takes place within some of our professional development days. And I did point to this earlier in the year in terms of who the presenter was, or some of the wording or narrative or themes within professional development that I think some of our parents have spoken to during public comment about what this policy is or is not, what it will be or what it's not. Again, the term of CRT being utilized, it's the professional development where some of those particular themes are discussed and suggested for implementation within the classroom that is not necessarily tied to curriculum that is or is not approved by this board. So for those reasons, I still think that there are some other guardrails that need to be put in place with this particular policy. Regardless of the decision of this board tonight, I hope that we will continue to collaborate and work towards obviously doing what we need to do to see that every student here at Wilson succeeds in whatever definition of success applies to each of our more than 6,000 students. But certainly for those reasons that I've stated, I do have some concerns as it's currently written. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Any other discussion?
Mr. McGreeny, I just want to, just for clarification, we did talk about class size, and we had a pretty robust discussion about it, I think, during curriculum committee. What was our final, 20 for K1 and
22 for 2 and 3,
and 24?
And Dr. Stout, just so I clarify, that is an average across the district, not in an individual classroom.
Yes, those are our goals.
Mr. President, I'd like to, first of all, the class size is something we'll have to discuss, down the road, but, the impact to, before I get on my rampage here, the impact, we always forget about our senior citizens. They're living on fixed income. And the person around this board told me once that senior citizens shouldn't live in their house. They should die in an apartment. They shouldn't be entitled to die in their house. I've got a problem with that personally. And I've said it before. My mom wanted to die in her house. I paid her tax bill. She died in her house. We have a thought process that's so focused also on one section of life. It's incredible. Which brings me to the lady that spoke, the second last lady that spoke tonight. I've been in ghettos, I've worked in ghettos, I've been chased out of ghettos, but we're all white and we sit, Luby, not you, sorry. We sit around here trying to make something happen that I'm still trying to grasp. People have the right to make decisions. We sit around here thinking, oh, well, we're going to fix something. Well, what's broken? We don't know that. Nobody's ever decided that. But I have a problem when white folks sit around trying to correct something for minorities. Because you weren't in ghettos, you haven't been chased, your life hasn't been threatened. I hold no grudges because it was my job. I did it. But when we sit around here trying to make things perfect, when we haven't been in situations, I've got a problem with that. Now, I got like 38 pages. I'm going to start off with, we were supposed to have a meeting prior to this to discuss some of the issues. I think some good steps were made in the right direction. Jay hit the same things I hit about shall, funding. All that is still in this document. And that leads to a lot of concern from various things, because amongst the financial things that I just spoke about, just recently, in the last week or two, California came out with a rule based on, after the death of George Floyd, to help racism and economic factors improve schools. If you don't hand in your homework, it's okay. It's late, okay? You don't get graded on it. You can hand it in when you want to. If you fail your test, you can take your test over. If you write an essay and it gets marked wrong, you have a chance to correct that. And all this is because we don't want these people to feel that they're being oppressed by the system again, this racism system, which I can't get my hands around. And what's really sad, go to work and say, I'm going to hand this report in next week. That's not going to fly too well with your supervisors. So we got a problem here with this policy, because this is what this policy says and does. And I know there's a lot of opinions. I love to sit down, especially with Brian. I like Brian over there. I get a kick out of him. I love to sit down and try to understand the concept of letting kids, not kids, but teachers teach. But when they get out into the real world, there's a question. Now, specifically, I do want to address, well, Jay's covered both of those issues, so I don't even have to address those. I don't think this policy is ready to be voted on, and it doesn't matter what I say, obviously I'm one person. But I think what's really going to be a problem with this is going to push back education. We're already falling behind the world. We've got all these special interest groups coming together, fracturing our educational system for special interest groups. This is not the way education should be. Education should be pretty straightforward. And this policy doesn't do that. It just, like I said, fractures it even further. So, you know what? I said enough. I'm not going to read this. Just let's move on. And just let that go.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
I have a couple of words. Just with regard to, by the way, I mean, I appreciate the additional information that was put in the policy, so thank you. I still was requesting, I had a long conversation with Dr. Kennedy about a discussion on costs. I'm willing to, I hope well, this is what I would like to see. I would like to see a benchmark of costs and all this other stuff for the audit. Before we audit anything, please benchmark a couple of things, specifically the number of our students in AP and honors courses, how many sections, how many students are in those sections. I want to make sure that we are not going to water down the rigor and curriculum of our district with inequity policy. I don't think we will, but I want to be assured that we're not going to. So let's benchmark that and share that with the public so we can keep a track of that. Also, I think we should get a line item of some sort within our finance committee for any kind of cost that's associated with this policy. And I'm sure it's going to run in many categories, but we should at least be tracking the expenses for this policy so we can adjust if necessary. I think we owe that to the community and our board. So are we able to track that? Can you assure us, Dr. Faley, that that can happen?
One of the things that I've been very clear about is the communications that we've heard from the board and the community regarding how this policy is going to increase our costs, and been very methodical about outlining within the policy that that is not going to occur. In reference to the data that you're asking to collect, we benchmark our AP data, and I think an individual communicated earlier this evening about ensuring that we continue to assess our students and to move forward with advanced coursework that continues to challenge not only their students but all students, whether it be AP class or a non-AP class. Over the course of the past 2 years, we worked very, very hard to provide additional opportunities to students that may not be able to get courses at our high school currently. They can get courses at Alvernia. They can get courses at Albright. Some of those courses are advanced further than we're able to offer currently at our high school. Some student I was speaking with is taking, and I don't know what the class is called, but it's the class beyond BC Calc, and they're doing that in high school at one of the local colleges. So we've made those steps in that direction to continue to provide opportunities for kids that may want to go further than what we're able to offer in our school system. And we've done that through looking at our course offerings and flexibility in scheduling, internships, etc. So to your question about what does the policy cost? The policy doesn't cost anything because we've embedded many of the things that would have cost money are being done internally. So equity audit, that is being developed internally by administrators in the Equity Council. The inclusion officer, the equity officer, is a current administrator already on the payroll, so to say. So in terms of creating some benchmarks, yes, we can create benchmarks, and that's the whole purpose of establishing the baseline through this Equity Council so that we can begin the work to make sure. The whole intent of this is not educational equality, it's opportunity and access for all students. And the purpose behind the equity policy is also to make sure that opportunity and access for all students means all students. Whether you're a minority student or not, doesn't matter. We want to make sure that we do the best job of education and providing services to all of our students, not just a certain population of students. And through equity of opportunity and access becomes comes improved educational systems throughout the entire organization. That's been demonstrated time and time again in other school systems. So the other key point that I want to mention is the fact that, as with all policies are able to be modified by the board. All policies are able to be studied more by the board through ad hoc processes. So we will provide the benchmarks. Dr. Hofford is already, through our conversation, working on that, and we will inform the board on a regular basis. In the event that there's an expenditure of the board for all students, all of those expenditures come to the full board for approval, regardless of what students, what population of students those are, what courses those are, and ultimately through the budget development process with the finance committee, that's where the decisions are made and recommendations are made to the full board regarding year-to-year budgets. So the board is in control of all of those things.
Mr. President, I need to answer that, what the superintendent just said. As written, this document as written, the board has no control over the cost. It shall, doesn't say it doesn't say it will or can. It shall reduce class sizes to 14. It shall do this. It shall do that. So I don't want to hear that there's no cost here, because 2-3 years down the road, there's going to be tremendous cost. So,
Mr.
please-
Martin, can you give an example of a cost that you're referring to that would come down the road
Okay.
that I may not be aware of?
Well, we won't be aware of. Well, the problem is, I'm aware of it.
I'm trying to understand your point.
Okay, so.
But I'm
when
not understanding your point.
Okay. In a couple months, you're going to roll out this new plan for elementary school that's going to have a preschool component, all these pieces that have to be funded for equity purposes, because kids in preschool can learn better, disadvantaged kids can get a better start. Who's going to pay for this? It's a cost. And right now, it says shall. And until this policy is adjusted to correct for these particular things that give control back to the board, I don't have a problem. But right now, as written, it says shall.
I mean, Mr. Martin, to be fair, the feasibility study was almost 4 years ago, which predates all of this. And we've been talking about class size in elementary overcrowding since I became a board member. So it's not like this just popped out of this policy. It kind of dovetails with what we're doing here.
And yes, I've been against class sizes of 14, 15 for 4 years ago too, because there's no logical explanation for that. I know you got a PhD and you're going to say all these things, but in the real world, produce a child that can actually work in the environment instead of all this other stuff. But getting back to the point, does say shall, and you can talk till your lips fall off, it says shall. That's the bottom line. Doesn't say consider it, it says shall.
Any other discussion?
So is that the one word that you're worried
Sure.
about? So if that word changed for,
I would be a lot more feeling comfortable that if there was wording in there that says we will use our best resources, but we shall commit to doing this.
I mean, can't you state that in a revision to the policy right now? Say, and we can vote on that, if you want
I
to
don't
change
think
that
I
one
can-
word?
What word are you suggesting, Mr. Martin?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. What do you? There's paragraph.
You've indicated that you're not
there's several
supportive of the word shall. Which word would you like to be
Well,
used?
I would need a minute to think of, I mean, I just can't come up with wording, but I do wording for legal documents all the time. But if you give me half an hour, I'll come back with the correct wording for that paragraph. I just can't, you got me under a little duress here, and I don't want to say something that is wrong. So I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth and do something I don't want to do right now. But I'm saying that paragraph, it was worded correctly, that said that, first of all, it's a defined term. That was your first question. It's back on the defined
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
No.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
7 yes, 2 no.
13.2, first reading of the following policy, 903, public participation in board meetings. Miscellaneous, we have enrollment report and committee reports. 15.1, Berks Career and Technology Center, Mrs. Casper.
I have no report.
Student Services, Mrs. Casper.
Yes. Student Services met for the first time since May of 2021 on Wednesday, November 3rd in the high school library at 4. The agenda was shared with the public at our last board meeting.
So I'm just going to highlight a couple of the things from each of the items on the agenda. Under special education and student services, one of the areas of improvement that the district is working on in this area is to provide additional parent resources and training sessions. I know I was honored to be included in supporting our EL instructional team when they hosted a parent resource night earlier this year. And I know there's some discussion about offering these types of resources in a series, so parents have a consistent means of accessing essential information about their students' education. This will also provide more opportunities for parents to participate in their students' education and be more included. Under what we spoke about around nursing and health services, Dr. Hoffert covered some of what the district is doing to alleviate the burden that our nursing offices have been undergoing recently by having an on-site third-party organization to conduct the contact tracing and the testing. So we talked a little bit about that, and Dr. Hoffert elaborated a little bit on that. Under mental health and counseling, we are working on providing parent forums and information sessions, and would like to be able to offer parent workshops, again, as a speaker series, in person or virtual. Also working with local agencies such as Safe Berks and Ampersand to provide mental health and counseling services to district students and their families. The district also hopes to provide enhanced mentoring programs, such as college-style tutoring programs and bringing in career mentors. Around issues of homelessness, we talked about providing a dedicated website with information available for the community about homelessness to help reduce some of the misconceptions about what homelessness is. The district also hopes to be applying for some grant funding to be able to supply customized devices to provide resources to students and their families who may be experiencing homelessness. Around equity and student experience, obviously we just voted on policy 832 and some clarifications that came with the revised version of the policy. As written in the policy, we hope to create an equity subcommittee or advisory council of the Student Services Committee that would meet regularly and include stakeholders. As was updated in policy 832, as Dr. Fadley had mentioned, he noted that the policy will not have any direct financial impact on the district, and that equity policy is not a standalone program to be implemented, but rather serves as a guideline. So this does provide the guardrails for other committees and bodies within the district to use when planning programs or activities or adopting curriculum and other resources. Any spending associated with this would come from those committees as they filter their decisions through an equity lens with full board approval consistent with all other practices. The revised policy clearly articulates that the equity coordinator is to be an appointed current administrator, not a new hire, and that the audit is not a paid service, but something developed by the Equity Council, which is an advisory group, not a board committee, created as a result of the policy. And then finally, language was added to reflect that nothing proposed in the policy should result in lowering our academic standards or eliminating opportunities for high-achieving students. That's my report.
Thank you. Berks IU, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you. Neither the Berks IU or the Curriculum Committee has met since our last board meeting.
Thank you. Berks EIT, Mr. Schlossman. Extracurricular, Mrs. Cocker.
Also no report.
Facilities, Mr. Negrini.
No report.
Finance Committee, Mr. Martin.
No report.
Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Yeah, there's several things that I want to talk about. One is really a thorn in my side. It's the audit report came out for producers in the pension fund, and they found quite a bit of fraud in that fund with millions of dollars lost. And the way that was written is that we got to figure out a way to present it so we don't offend people. Well, I'm offended already because I already paid for that, and I'm going to pay for it again. So we have these organizations that are allowed to invest in funds overseas. We're allowed them, one person can make these decisions and create some really bad investments, and there's no accountability again. So that report is going to be released to the public, I believe, in the next week or so in a modified version. So it's supposed to be lower keyed, and hopefully they'll tell the truth and not, how figures lie. But I did want to bring that up because that's when I think I mentioned that about a year and a half ago. I was concerned about that. Well, now the audit findings, you don't have to be an Einstein to figure out if this value is here and it goes to zero, there was something wrong with that audit. But anyway, also I want to talk about charter schools real quick. There's a lot of charter school reforms coming. They're in-house. And one thing that's important to understand, and the Pennsylvania School Board Association has finally backed away and said that charter schools are a necessity. We do need them, but how do we work with charter schools? So at least there's kind of a small little branch sticking out there, but the key issues is proper funding, proper transparency, and also most important to me is to make sure that the students have the same type of quality education. So a lot of these are in process in the House. They're not come to the floor yet. I don't know if they will come to the floor this year because they'll be on vacation, not too far seen in the future. So that's pretty important. There's also a couple bills that made out of committee. One that I know some would be of interest is the representative, and there's a typo here, but maybe it's right, I don't know. Martina White expands eligibility for students in scholarships from 1,000 to 2,000 if they are attending secondary school. That's House Bill 642. That gives opportunity for parents to use those credits to look at other institutions. So that's just a small thing, but the PSAB is against that because they feel that's related to the old voucher system. So that's good. If you agree or disagree, you can speak to your House representative on that. I'm not going to say one way or another on that. So, and one other thing is we have this fiscal office, IFO. They came out with a statement that, taxes were relatively flat last year. However, they expect significant increases in the coming year. And one of the reasons for that is the Act 1 index is skyrocketed. So school districts can start charging above and beyond what would be a normal year. And because what it caused that is the wage increases for COVID pushed that act up substantially higher. So schools have the ability to go way above and beyond what they would have normally had. So that's going to be an interesting concept, coupled with the fact that the lawsuit, which I would be more concerned about, that's currently in our state legal system, is with school funding, where there's, you may have read, I'm sure everybody heard or read about it, there's a push by several rural schools as well as several inner city schools that the funding system that the state has in place through property taxes is unfair. They would like to see a system that's better unified across the whole state. And the problem with that is it's going to cost, right now, the estimates, first of all, I don't believe their estimates because they were talking about the average school district is like 13,000, but the high ones go to 30,000. But right now they're saying if this goes through the legal system and the outcome is positive for them, it will increase taxes from $3.4 to $4 billion a year. That money has to obviously come from someone, and there's different theories of how to get that. I'm not going to get into that because I'm not sure where this legislation is headed, but each school would get X amount of dollars, and there'll be some type of other way of raising funds. So this, there's pros and cons of this. I personally believe in funding every student should get X amount of dollars, and because education doesn't matter where you're born. But this would not do away with property taxes, just increase additional taxes. So I'm not sure that's the right way to go, but it's a big number. That's it.
Thank you. Human Resources, no report. Education Foundation, Mr. Cate. Oh, back up. Public Relations, Mr. Strauman.
Thank you. First, I just wanted to publicly thank Esterbrook Pharmacy for hosting a voluntary vaccine clinic for our students this past week in our lower house cafeteria. Esterbrook is a great community partner that helped to create an extremely well-run, efficient clinic that served 300 students in our district. We also want to thank the nurses, pediatricians, district staff, and students who volunteered their time. We received an email from a parent that I wanted to share. I wanted to share my appreciation for hosting last night's vaccine clinic. The snacks, mascot, adorable stickers, and wonderful staff were a great way to help distract our kids. My daughter had a great experience. I also had 2 students that came to me this morning to show me their stickers and their cool Band-Aids. I'm sure there were many people who were involved in making last night a success, so please pass along my gratitude. So thank you again to everyone who was involved in making this clinic possible. I also wanted to acknowledge that this week is National Education Week, and we want to thank the community who are recognizing our teachers and staff with many special treats throughout the week. This is also a great opportunity for all of us to celebrate the importance of public education. And finally, during the week of November 8th through 12th, school districts throughout the country celebrated National School Psychology Week to highlight the important work school psychologists and other educators do to help our students thrive. We recognized our amazing school psychologists through a district-wide staff email, social media, and our weekly Bulldog Blitz. We're thrilled to recognize this outstanding team for the incredible work they do for our school community. Thank you.
Thank you. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
The Education Foundation, I have no report, but the foundation meets this Friday at 7:30 in the morning. I have a work commitment, so if there are any board members that would like to go and have a fantastic start to your Friday morning, please feel free to come forward and, it'd be a great experience. Thanks.
Technology, Mr. Schneider.
We haven't met since our last meeting, so I have no report. Our next meeting is December 6th at 4:30, I'm assuming up in the ITAP lab.
Student Outreach, Mrs. Nadia Greeny.
So first of all, this week in the high school, the Wilson Theater Company will be performing their second show of their season and the first musical of their season, James and the Giant Peach. Tickets are on sale currently now, and the show will be this Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 7 p.m. I've been talking with a lot of people who are either performing or in stage crew, and they're really excited about it, and it's a really great show for all ages, so definitely check that out. The Mental Health Council is painting positive quotes in the bathroom stall doors leading up to the end of this week and then the 2 half days next week before Thanksgiving break as a way to spread optimism and kindness throughout the school. And lastly, the high school football team defeated Central York this past week. They were the #1 seed, so this means that the team will compete in the District 3 6A championship this Saturday at 1 p.m. against Harrisburg.
Thank you. Mrs. Cocker, do we have public participation on non-agenda items?
Yes.
Mr. Maravich?
I'll truncate it a little bit, but public comment is not question and answer, but instead is opportunity to offer comments on matters that are before or may come before the board. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to individuals. Clapping, calling out, and cheering is not permitted, nor are conversations in the audience. Individuals shall have 3 minutes, and I'll give notice at 1 minute. Any person making any threats of any type, personal, offensive, or impertinent remarks, or any person becoming unruly may be removed from the meeting or may be cited by local police.
Okay. Craig Stonaha, General.
Thank you, everyone, again, for letting me speak this week. Stood up here 2 weeks ago, and I made a call for unity, and just pleaded that these seats be treated with respect, the respect that your seats deserve, and that for everybody to basically do your best to act like leaders. And I got to tell you, I've been unbelievably disappointed in the last probably 3-4 weeks. I've got a few stories here. that I just want to kind of run through things that have happened. We had a board member actually calling anyone that doesn't support them a right-wing extremist. That would be laughable if it wasn't such a disturbing comment. Another one said that every single person in Green Valley is a racist, simply because the board member didn't agree with the way they voted. I mean, a racist? Really? I mean, that's not right. I have a third one here that I'm going to skip because it was a personal insult. I'm hoping maybe the board member and I can speak after this meeting, but it's a doozy. I'm sad I can't share it with you guys. And then my personal favorite is, of course, a classic, the anti-science comment, which becomes famous. Not any specific science, just anti-science in general. I know the MDs, PhDs, and researchers who come up here to speak had a kick out of that one. I think they're having T-shirts made, I'm not sure. Guys, this isn't junior high. This is kind of insanity. So when we sit here and we talk about anti-bullying policies, and then we go ahead and we bully our own community. We talk about equity while simultaneously calling our community racists. This is not how you behave. My father used to have something that he used to say, and I didn't always get it when I was a kid, but he used to say, liars think that everyone lies, thieves think that everyone steals, and extremists think that everyone else is an extremist. And it rings true. We need to stop projecting this. Stop judging your community. We need to get introspective. You guys need to look, not all of you. I mean, it's only a choice few. And it's amazing some of the work that's been done up here, but then some of the behavior we've seen is not what leadership is. We need to look internally.
1 minute.
This is not a call for unity right now. This is a call to the members of the board who are reasonable, the good board members who I've sat down with, I've had lunch with, that we've talked about serious topics. We have to stop participating in this behavior. We need to stop allowing the bullies that are on this board to drive this community's conversation, because that's what's happening right now, and we've seen the results. We need more meeting one-on-one with the community, those of you who are willing, and I wish all of you were. More time sitting down with us, getting engaged, getting informed in why people are concerned. It's not that complicated. We all want the same things. But I feel like getting that conversation going has been one of the hardest things I've ever seen happen in my life for a bunch of people that shop at the same stores and eat at the same restaurants. We're all neighbors. We've got to do better. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Janakovo, Mass Policy.
So this does relate to mass policy, but I want to clarify before I start. I'm not anti-veteran. My personal and both business tax account would very clearly back that up. I'm not anti-student. I'm not anti-gatherings or celebrations. I'm not anti-football players, teachers, volunteers, coaches, PTO, or community organizations that help our school district thrive and have fun. All of that said, in the vein of hypocrisy, yet again, you stand in your own hypocrisy. Our students are masked up, but for the Veterans Day Dinner Appreciation Dance, on your own Facebook page photo, big chunk of the audience, no masks. No food on the table, no masks. So which is it? If I sing a little song, do a little dance, am I good? Woo! I'm good. Is that right? I mean, you all wanted this policy. So that's that. I find it also very interesting, tonight's agenda. We spend money for therapy dogs while throwing 2 people to tax collections. No one commented on that. That's interesting. On this equity policy, just to wrap that up, would you really have us believe there'll be no cost? We're going to establish a subcommittee, a sub-task force, whatever you want to call it, that will be satisfied to make suggestions with no quantifiable change in course, implementation of anything. This board would have us believe that that's the case. I mean, you guys can't even tell a true story about incidents that go on here in school. So I'm just not sure how anybody's supposed to take that to account. You know,
1 minute.
while I applaud reaching out to various language learners, again, in the name of equity, as an example, my brother-in-law came here from Romania. So are we going to have those kinds of language supports for learners, every language that might find its way into our school district. Again, we shall be committed, right? You would insult our intelligence and think there's no cost. And lastly, I'm going to wrap up. I sat in a curriculum meeting that said the goal of our program, or our social studies program, is to create an effective citizenry. That was the most dangerous statement to me. I'm not sure who controls the parameters of effective citizenry, but so far as I recall, from taking a recent citizens test, so long as you met the measure of the test, which was very defined, not qualitative, quantitative, you were an effective citizen. I don't see where Wilson School District gets to decide that.
Thank you.
Tiffany Long, mandate CRT.
Hi. Before I start, I did ask a question last time, and I emailed about funding for universal compliance funding, and I got a response that she needed a 30-day extension, and I never heard back since then. So I don't know if she's here or we can discuss that after, but that seems very suspicious to me. And I mean, basically, I pretty much must have, the answer must be yes, but anyways. Oh, it was sent today. I didn't get it. Okay, I'll have to check. Okay, can I start? Okay, so I haven't seen the response yet, but 30 days and nothing. So anyways, I'm also curious how masks have even been legal after they were never approved in the PA courts. It's a violation of our constitutional human God-given rights. As far as science, there are numerous studies by doctors and experts showing that masks do not protect against the Rona. Major figure saying that the cons far outweigh the benefit, and he would take his children out of school before complying with the shot. Speaking of that, the number of homeschoolers have doubled in size in the past year. The particle size-wise just show they just don't cause protection. Like Gwen said, kids eat snacks, they eat lunch, they play outside maskless, and that's at least 15 minutes. So if only 15 minutes of exposure causes a potential transfer, the damage is already done. So what's with the song and dance? There's numerous videos that you can find easily, or I'd be happy to send them to you. The amount that they're touching their faces is just not good for their pathogens, for their physical health, harming them educationally because they can't see mouths, expressions, or learn speech properly. Mental health problems and suicides are higher than ever. In regard to aggressiveness, Dave Grossman's book, who's an Army lieutenant, also teaches the psychology and the act of killing and lethal force. During training of soldiers, 40% easier to kill people and have no empathy when they're masked. When an enemy is masked, it's 60% easier to not connect with them. According to his findings, the continuation of masking will result in 50% increase in violence, 50% less empathy, 50% dehumanization of their peers. Don't believe me that they don't work? Go look at the side of a box. It says they do not protect against COVID. Disposable ones contain cancer-causing chemicals that children are inhaling all day. Cloth ones have toxic materials, unless they're USDA organic. In addition, once they're washed in laundry detergent, they're breathing in all those cancer-causing ingredients. There is also a scientific study.
1 minute.
Wearing them over 3 minutes has irreversible brain damage. A Harvard study just came out showing 22 points lower IQs in children since last January. So they're doing major damage. In addition, testing is extremely painful. The testing contains cancer-causing chemicals, breaks their blood vessels. I've seen kids with blood coming gushing out of their nose and eyes. So it's aggressive. It doesn't have to be that aggressive. The virus is not that bad. Stephen Hawking, he's a genius. Don't want to believe me. He said that the #1 cause of the Earth's demise will be a genetically modified vaccine that will backfire on us. They skip the animal studies. So anyone that's getting their children this shot are literally giving their kids are lab rats. There was someone that just said that it had Luciferian crystals with a patent, so I believe it's evil. I think it's going to cause massive depopulation, and if you guys go with it, I've already seen tons of deaths. Go look at Congress. There are so many studies, and doctors and nurses would rather lose their jobs than take this. So, okay.
Thank you.
Chastity Santiago, AP classes and cost.
So, I've heard a lot of talk about cost and, this doesn't cost and that doesn't cost, but I want to start out with just a quote, is through the exchange that difference becomes a blessing and not a curse. The passing of this policy that just happened tonight, you have created those lines that weren't there before. The exceptional students, everything that they've done, what has it been for? Because now everybody's going to have this equal opportunity that didn't exist. Let me tell you, my son is in AP classes. He is a minority, and he didn't need your equity policy. He didn't need anybody's handouts. He worked hard and achieved it on his own. And now I have to go home and talk to him about why it doesn't matter, because you know what? All of this stuff in the equity policy, nobody's paying for, but yet I have to pay a fee for my child who is in AP classes. What is that about? Is the equity policy going to help those exceptional students and take those fees away? That I'm not complaining about, but now I am. You want to sit here and say there's no fees, but yet our exceptional students, we're paying for that. Can somebody tell me if that's going to be paid for? Where does that come from? The cost is a lot more than monetary at this point. It's emotional, and we are setting our children up for failure in a society where they are held accountable for their actions and their choices. And this school board just seems to not understand that. I'm a director of global operations, okay, employing people around the world. I have given over 20,000 people jobs because of COVID. And I work 16 hours a day and run an animal rescue as well. And my son can still achieve straight A's. He's a wrestler. And yet, you guys think you can just pass a policy? Have you walked in my shoes? Have you been a Hispanic divorced single mother? No, and no one asked me for my opinion, except Mr. Martin, who wanted to actually hear and admit that he doesn't know my life story and he doesn't speak for me. But none of you allowed us to speak for ourselves. Instead, you pick and choose, and it's okay. It's fine, I'm used to it. But you're not gonna, at one point I was gonna take my son out of school. I'm not leaving Wilson now, just because this policy passed tonight. You will see me every meeting. I'm not leaving.
Thank you.
President Hart, those are all the papers that I have.
All right, thank you. Any other business before the board? Mr. Martin?
Mr. President, I alluded to this, not my favorite thing. I alluded to this earlier about the especially challenged student at Southern who's been there, who's terrorized, kicked, bitten, and things. I want that student removed immediately. I can no longer tolerate hearing what this child is doing because this child knows somebody. I don't know who they know, but this is not acceptable. They don't belong in our school. We have to find a place for them, and I want an action plan by next time. When I get here next time, that child better have an action plan out of this school district, because I will not tolerate a teacher being spit on daily anymore. And the administration has known about this for over a month and chose not to address the issue. And that's not acceptable to me. I want that child removed. Also, that was just the first item I have. At the last meeting, I mentioned about we should have a republic form of government. And some of the comments I got back from people really scare me. They said, well, we don't want to turn it into a communist country. Does anybody know what a republic government is? Where's our civics at? I mean, I'm really concerned because a republic is your basic form of democracy. And when I get comments like that, I say, wow, maybe we can do a better job on that. But I just want to clarify that. A republic is a basic form of democracy. Democratic is the next step in the way when people can't vote directly. What's not right?
They're both forms of democracy. Republic is representative democracy, direct is direct. We want the record to be accurate.
Thank you for technically correcting me. I appreciate that. Thank you. I do appreciate that. Now, where was I? Oh, another thing that really irritated me was I saw last Friday, I was very busy, but I saw an email come out from the superintendent saying privileged and confidential information discussed with the attorney. I didn't open it. I won't open it because I don't know what's inside there. It could, first of all, it restricts the public's right to see what's there, so that's why it's privileged and confidential. I don't believe that should ever occur unless there are certain situations where it's a personnel situation. Like I said, I don't want to be reading something like that and find out I'm talking about it later down the road. Like I said, I won't open it. You don't even have to send them to me in the future. I'm not going to open them, and just take me off that list. I don't believe in that, and that's something I firmly believe in. I don't want to know something, that a situation occurs between a superintendent and the solicitor. If they want to keep it between themselves, fine. Shouldn't go to the board, so the board knows what's everything in there, because you're limited into what you can talk about. The final thing I have here, if I can find it, I'm a little upset. I wanted to talk to an administrator the other day, and I'm told that the superintendent said they're no longer allowed to talk to me or any board member without a chaperone, which really blew me away. I was quite annoyed at that. So I don't know what's going on here, but that doesn't fly with me either. I'm not, in the future, I will just come into the office, I'll sit down until somebody talks to me. I'm not going to tolerate somebody telling me that I need to talk with somebody else in that room with me. That's just not right. So, and I'll talk about the next meeting. Thank you.
Dr. Bailey?
Mr. Hart, first of all, I want to address Mr. Martin's comments regarding the privileged and confidential communication. The communication was marked privileged and confidential because the district solicitor advised the administration that it needed to be marked privileged and confidential to protect the communication, because it was not a communication that was to be a public record because of the content of the communication. Mr. Moravich can elaborate on that. I'm not sure what you're referring to regarding talking with administration. I think that we've demonstrated as a team that board members are privy to meeting and discussing and communicating with members of my team. It's been 4 years. Never excluded a board member from talking to an administrator. So if you could speak with me after the meeting, I would love to hear where that came from. And moving forward, if you have a question of anyone on my team, you're more than willing to ask that question. I would only ask that you include me in the question, because I may have the answer and they may not.
Thank you. Any other discussion before the board? I just wanted to say real quick before we adjourn, this is my last meeting as board president. I've had 2 years. I wanted to thank the board and everyone else for how they supported me. We may have had our differences, but we always agreed we want to do what's best for children, and that's why we're here. So I want to thank everyone for helping me through the past 2 years. I look forward to have 2 more years on the board, and I look forward to supporting the new president and starting in December. So thank you again for everyone. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Martin first. Do you have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider.